I'm Shirley Malcom, and I'm Director of Sea Change, STEM Equity Achievement Change. We are happy to have you with us today, and we want to give you a few updates about what's going on within Sea Change. For one thing, our team is expanding, and we are happy about that because it means that we can begin to look at some of the other aspects of Sea Change that we have wanted to consider, such as beginning to look at the disciplinary sea change structures. We have one disciplinary sea change structure in place, and we're looking to add other team members on this. But the most exciting thing for me is that we have a deputy director for Sea Change, Dr. Valeria Sinclair-Chapman. And I have known Dr. Sinclair-Chapman for a long time now. I stop and think about it and realize that she has so many of the skills that could really help take Sea Change to the next level. And so we are thrilled that she has joined us. She is a full professor from Purdue University, and yet has joined our motley crew. And so I just want to welcome Valeria and then ask you to just take a few minutes to introduce yourself so that the Sea Change community will know who you are and why I'm so
What?
happy.
Oh, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you, Shirley, for this opportunity to have this conversation. Um, I am a full professor. I'm a social scientist, and so I study politics and in the behavior of people, and strategies related to that, and how politics can make sense, even if a lot of times we think it doesn't. And so I think it helps coming into Sea Change because I've worked my way up through the tenure track in higher education, and I've had the ups and downs, in every way almost that the data could say that it affects women and women of color. I've experienced quite a few of them. And so it gives me a particular kind of perspective. The team here is fabulous, just so talented and innovative. I'm just excited with this opportunity.
Well, I'm glad you're here. But I want us to just ask you, because quite frankly, that's a major shift from academia to come into a nonprofit, um, into this team that is working so hard and diligently to support institutional transformation, to support the kind of change that will be necessary so that those bumps that you hit along the way, that we can smooth that path. What did you see that about sea change that would mean that you would take a chance and come over into this team? Why do you believe that this kind of strategy has a chance?
Well, not only do I believe that approaches like Sea Change have a chance, I believe that they're indispensable. They're absolutely necessary for the well being of higher education, the inclusion of every aspect of talent that we have nationally, as well as, I think, just plainly for national security, right? I think that the United States has got to be competitive in the world market in terms of science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine. And so we cannot afford to leave talent on the cutting room floor because of structural barriers that are fixable, right? So I often said when I was at Purdue, my previous institution, that if we can put a man on the moon, we can do this, right? This is not rocket science, right? And so we can figure out a way to solve these problems. And so I was ready for it. It seemed like an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Plus, working with the famed Shirley Malcom. So we had spent some time together previously, and one of my mentors at Purdue knows you really well, Chris Saley, and so that connection was irresistible on my part. I, I couldn't. I will say that there are headwinds out there that would suggest that now is the time. Now is not the right time to pursue these kinds of initiatives. For me, the murder of George Floyd in 2020 was really, I've always been impatient, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, what are we going to do to actually create the kind of change that is meaningful on the ground, so that when I talk to my colleagues and when other people talk to their colleagues 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they're not telling me, hey, we had these same conversations 25 years ago, right? We really need to move the needle. It is important for the country. It is not goodwill work. It's not charity work. This is really a business case. This is a rationale for achievement as a country. And I think that now is the time to do it, regardless of the headwinds. People don't like change. The great Shirley Malcom said recently that the only one that likes change is a baby, right? Is a wet
A
baby.
wet one.
And so people may resist change, and they're going to resist it in pockets. It's not everybody. It's just loud voices of a small set of people. And if we persist, sea change is a good model, period,
Yeah.
right? It requires a self-reflective look at your institution. You use your own data. You set your own goals. But you're really saying, where are the spaces where we have gaps? Who is the system working for and who is it not working for? And how can we expand that ambit so it works for more people? And that's what we're asking. And every institution ought to be just chomping at the bit to get at those kinds of questions so that they can serve their students and their faculty and their staff well. And when they do that, they actually contribute to the well-being of the entire country, and of industry, right? And so I think now is the right time.
Yeah, I agree with you that now is the right time. Having reached this age and having come from the Jim Crow South, I know that change isn't always easy. But now I feel a certain amount of optimism because, to a certain extent, people are starting to understand all those things that you enumerated. The fact that we have economic reasons, that we have national security reasons, that we have quality of life reasons, that we have all these things that we really need to look at and focus on. But the other thing is that the enterprise itself depends on inclusion, and you can't have excellence without that kind of inclusion, without the work of involving minds from diverse places, different lived experiences, different ways of looking at the world, and that's how we find our best selves. And so I am, in fact, optimistic. The question that I would put to you is, you come from a different perspective. I was on the faculty a long time ago, but you came recently from the faculty and you have engaged around that negativity. How do you push back? How do you challenge the people who challenge you? I think that in many cases, as you said, those voices are loud and they are insistent, but they aren't always right. So, how do you push back?
Well, and Shirley, I'm going to turn the tables and ask you the same questions, but first I'll answer it. And I think that again, if we go to the sea change model, evidence should help. Now let me say this. I don't think that education, I believe in higher education, but I don't think that just having the information is sufficient to change, right? You got to have more than just the bare bones information, but without the information, the data, the evidence, you're not persuasive. You're telling stories and anecdotes, right? And you're asking for people to believe you, because of whatever emotional response. What I believe in fundamentally is that the evidence should support our claims, and we should follow the evidence where it takes us, right? And so when we encounter pushback, we should be able to ask, where's your data? What's your evidence? What literature are you referencing in your change model? We all have change models. They're implicit, right? So they might not be explicit. People might not be putting them on the table. There will always be beneficiaries. We need to start putting that information. Let's make it public. Who does your system work for? Who are you protecting here? And who's left out? Who's not at the table? I think that those are some of the questions that we can ask. And in terms of kind of staying the course, because I think right now it's hard. But I will say this historically, right? We've had other hard moments. Shirley, you've mentioned them today. We can go back to over the course of American history and say that there's always, when there's a push, there's typically a backlash, and then there's a shift in the country. And I'm not saying that it's linear. I know that we have to do the work, but we should expect the ups and downs, and we have to persist. But Shirley, I wondered too on your end. You have talked to Sea Change members across the country. You have connections with faculty and administrative leaders around the country and around the world. Um, what are you hearing in terms of how Sea Change members are actually responding to this pushback? And it's not only in the US, but it's expanding across the globe. What are you hearing now?
It's interesting you talk about it expanding across the globe because I was in Madrid for an European Union meeting. It's talking about gender science, technology, and innovation. And I said to them, coming to a country near you, the kind of aspect of pushing back on talking about wokeness and all these kinds of things. And what I hear is, on the one hand, people talking about cancel culture and wokeness, and on the other hand, some people understanding that without those perspectives, our science isn't going to be as good. And I keep saying your technologies are not inclusive, and I keep providing evidence and providing example case studies because I think that in many cases people just haven't thought about it. They accept the labeling that gets
Hmm.
put on by someone else, and we laugh. I have a friend who coined this idea of Shirley's Law. If you don't tell your own story, someone else will tell it for you, and you may not like how it sounds. And I think that in many cases, we haven't told our story. We have not done a good job of helping people understand why we do what we do, why the perspectives of different people are absolutely critical, why the data are absolutely critical, and why we have to lift it up in a way that people can understand the changes that we're talking about. We're not talking about first thing that people many want to say is you're getting people who are not qualified, and I'm like, why do you say that? What's your
Mhm.
basis for saying that? And then they may say something like, well, their SAT scores weren't as high. And in many cases, the same people that they're talking about whose SAT scores might not have been as high, their grade point averages were higher. That is the case when you look at the women that, for example, that we admit to our colleges, that they tend to have higher grade point averages and stronger records.
Mhm.
So why lean on this one thing that is not representative of what you want people to bring into STEM? So it's this thing of one of Lauren Resnick, a colleague that I worked with a number of years ago, said we tend to value what we can measure rather than measure what we value. In science, we value creativity, we value innovation, we value different perspectives, we value a lot of things. Well, that's not going to necessarily be outlined in a standardized test number. That's not going to give you that. And so the question then becomes, what is the basis of what people are saying? And we tend not to push back enough. And I write, okay? You know that I will do editorials and I will do thought pieces and issues pieces. And I think that more people have to write and more people have to put the data out there because the other side, the people who are on the other side, they write, but the stuff that they write is often not accurate
Mhm.
in terms of how they are portraying and how they are putting forward their position, not necessarily the facts. And so, one of the things that is so powerful, I think, about sea change is to have people look at their own numbers and then own their own numbers. Explain how they got to where they are and why they look the way they look.
I mean, if I can jump in here, I think it's a responsibility. I've worked at private institutions, small private liberal arts. I've worked at large land grant institutions, and I think we have a responsibility to the students that we enroll, to the faculty and staff that we hire, um, as well as to the communities where these institutions exist, where they sit. And when you make a difference for an incoming first generation student, you really change the trajectory for a family. I mean, these things are consequential. And so I think that the responsibility is one of the things that really ought to be driving institutions. Again, I think the goodwill is fine, and it's important. I think that really wanting to do the right thing is important. Um, so let me put it like this: I think it's necessary but not sufficient. I think that institutions must consider how failing to do this work, this self-reflective work, to pay attention to their data, hits them on a bottom line. And it might not do it soon, but it will catch up with you eventually. That's how this is going to go. And so that's what I'm saying to institutions. I think that's what Sea Change is kind of like you know, um, a, a lighthouse might not be the right word, but it's just really a kind of something that's showing folks, hey, just look out for the rocks. They're there. And the rocks are the ones that we actually create, right? We do not have to be unaware of the barriers that exist in our own systems. I think about sometimes folks say, oh, there's no way to get this done. And I tell people all the time the same story, and that is it's about overheads, right? I loved overheads. I used them persistently with joy, and eventually students stopped wanting to have overheads, right? Not only did the students demand something else, but all of a sudden the overhead projectors were not in my classrooms, and they were wiring entire buildings for internet access. And then the students were looking to have PowerPoints. So it didn't matter that I was resisting it or that no one asked me whether I wanted to do it. They created an infrastructure for this to work, for these PowerPoints to work. There was a demand for it, and the entire institution shifted. And it didn't take a long time to happen. And so that kind of idea about where we are headed is really, we need to go on and get moving. It doesn't have to take a long time. We need to make some decisions and set some goals. One of the things that I also think about this is that we need to focus on problem solving, right? To identify gaps, equity gaps, etc. And and Shirley, I'm thinking of uh, the diversity walks book. I can't remember the name of it, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, from equity talk to equity walk.
Yes, yes, from equity talk to equity walk. That's what we're talking about. When we can identify, when the data shows us what the gaps are, address it, and start using that as a problem to solve. And then we can take whatever kind of politics or feelings out of it and start solving problems the same way that they solved the problem of faculty who wanted to stick with overheads. There's none of them left. We're dinosaurs, right? And so let's create an
Well,
infrastructure. Right, exactly.
what about
Uh-huh.
yeah, what about the middle of the pandemic when everybody went on to Zoom?
Right,
All of a
right,
sudden,
exactly.
you didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice. This was the only option we had.
Right,
And the people who did not want to get with the program, they had a real problem. And I think that this notion of how do we help people, how do we support change? That's the question. Not change or no change,
right,
but supported
right,
change. And that's one of the things that we talk about within the context of Sea Change. How do we support that kind of transformation? And I believe, I fully believe that once we are able to get over this initial resistance, that we
right.
will begin to see how valuable these kinds of conversations are within the academy.
Shirley, I want to just co-sign that 100% and just say that I love what you said, that it's not a choice between change or no change. The change is going to come. And I think that it is also about what your intentions are. So um, someone recently said that discrimination is expensive. And
It
so,
is.
and 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 it's costly. It is costly to have inefficient systems that fail consistently with certain groups of people. And so when we can remedy that, and be intentional, be aware and intentional, we're gonna gain the competitive edge. The student body is changing. COVID has also ushered in new shifts for who our students will be, who is applying to college, who will come into the marketplace here, but also in technology, right? All of these jobs will require some aspect of technology. We have got to train our students, and our jobs are changing. So we have a responsibility to the country, even at the most elite schools in the world. And I think that good science is inclusive science. It reflects the full scope of people, from disability, from gender and sexuality, race and ethnicity, on and on, right? Class. It Good science will reflect the abilities and interest and work of all of these people from all backgrounds. And I think that that is part of the effort of what we are doing in Sea Change. And so, just like it was irresistible to me when I was trying to stay in my tenured, fully tenured, full professor position, and this opportunity came up, I hope that Sea Change becomes irresistible out here with others, because it will help them do the work that they are trying to do.
Thank you so much, Valeria. It's a great morning to start off with this kind of conversation. And I want to thank the community as well for joining us. And I think that you're beginning to see that we see this as a strategy that will allow you to do what you absolutely need to do, but in a way that you have friends and supporters and you have colleagues who can help you get through the rough spots. So here we are, optimistic, ready to roll.